IT problems. Anyhow, I want to reintroduce, if I get, I want to reintroduce James Bryant of Market Invoice. Thanks very much.
Thank you. A second clap. Keep going. So sorry for the delay. Yes, as mentioned, my name's James Bryant. I'm the Partnerships Manager for Market Invoice. If you know us, great. If you don't, then hopefully I'll be able to explain a little bit more and understand a little bit better come the end of this presentation. So, as a general overview to, I guess, the origins of Market Invoice, the alternative finance is booming, as many of us in this sector know. From 2012 to 2013, the sector tripled in size. From 2013 to 2014, it tripled again. As you can see at the bottom, apologies if you're having a cranial neck, peer-to-peer business lending, peer-to-peer consumer lending are two of the most prominent, but at the same time, invoice trading within there, which Market Invoice are one of the market leaders in, is really flourishing within this sector as well. So how did Market Invoice come about? So back in 2008, when the credit crisis happened and the banking retrenchment really started taking hold, there was a general perceived reluctance of banks to lend to SMEs, which opened up an opportunity for companies such as ourselves to offer potentially a more innovative solution to many of the core services that banks have historically provided. At the same time, long payment terms were becoming an increasingly big factor of SMEs. About 41% of companies say that cash flow is their biggest concern. And one of the reasons that is because of long payment terms. Blue chips taking 60, 90 days to actually pay the invoice that are owed to small businesses, putting these businesses under severe trouble. Finally, invoice finance. As I was speaking to many of you beforehand, some of you are familiar with invoice finance, and most people don't have a particularly good opinion of it. And that is justified in many cases. There are long-term onerous contracts that tie users into putting their entire ledger through the platform, even if they don't need it. It's typically associated with companies that are tight on cash flow, who are really struggling and have no choice but to put their entire ledger through an invoice finance platform. We believe that there's an opportunity to totally revolutionize that sector and open up invoice finance to fast-growing B2B companies. Next slide, please. So, from there, launched Market Invoice. We have funded over £420 million worth of invoices since our inception in 2011. We've experienced 220% growth over that time. For those who are not familiar with the concept of invoice finance, I'll give you a brief overview. Essentially, so for example, we have a company who's providing digital services to a Nike, a major substantial company, and they provide the product. They have to pay their staff. They have to fund the entire project themselves, and Nike go, great job, we'll pay you in 3 months. In the meantime, that company has to pay their staff. They have to fund the company for the next 90 days, and how are they going to do that? How are they going to do that? How are they going to do the presentation? How are they going to do the project which is coming up next week, which is coming up 2 weeks down the line, 3 weeks down the line? They might have to put that off entirely, or they come to Market Invoice. What we will do is we will take that invoice, we will fund it through our selection of investors. These are investors like hedge funds, pension funds, asset managers. The UK government actually funds invoices through our platform, through the British Business Bank. The first 25% of every invoice that is funded through Market Invoice is funded by the UK government. So we have that validity. We are a growing company, and we are funding more and more fast-growing companies within this space with a flexible, selective invoice finance facility. So what we really did, I guess, coming back to the theme of banks versus fintech creating real rivals, how do we know we're creating a real rival? What have we done differently to what banks have done that have enabled us to create a product which is genuinely competitive? I do apologize that this seems to be too low down. If I could do anything to pull that up, I would. So what we've done, we've focused in on 4 key tenets, which is actually, you'll see many similarities between what other sectors have seen disruption. I guess maybe Spotify, Netflix, Amazon would fall under, would use, say, I guess, flexibility, speed, transparency, maybe even, some of the key tenets that have enabled them to disrupt their markets. It's the same reason which has enabled Market Invoice to disrupt our market. Flexibility, we have allowed, sorry, do you mind? I hope I'm not going over the time. So flexibility, we allow, as I mentioned, we allow companies to use Market Invoice selectively, and that totally transforms the way people typically consider invoice financing companies to work. That allows companies to use invoices as and when, they use the platform as and when they please. If they have a big project coming up, and then they know that they need that cash flow, then they can put the invoice through the platform and there are no additional fees. There's simply a pay-as-you-go fee, no tie-in, no monthly fee if you don't end up using the platform. It's totally flexible. Speed. We are able to, the fastest we have ever funded an invoice from application through to receiving the funds within your account is 90 minutes. Now that was a particularly unusual occasion. We had a very, very determined seller. They had all of their information right there in front of them, and they happened to get there at the right time of day. But that shows how quickly we can move. Just 2 months ago, we allowed a company came to us and said, we need £1 million. We have a £1 million invoice. We need to put you through your platform today. How quickly can we get that money? We funded 80% of that invoice within 48 hours. A bank could not do that if they tried. It's just because of the technology, because we're a technology-led company, we're able to use this technology to actually provide a far superior service to that is out there at the moment. Security is arguably the most important aspect for any fintech company. One of the main reasons the banks still hold, I guess, a dominant market share in a lot of these small business lending is because they have that perceived security. People trust their banks, and rightfully so. Why should they trust this upstart who they've never heard of to give their money to? This isn't Spotify, this isn't music, this is their money. They need to be sure that that this company deserves our trust. So we have a fully in-house risk model that analyzes over 100 data points, both offline and online, and ensures that we do not lose their money. Our default rate is, I believe, 1.9%. Our crystallized loss is only 0.03% for our investors. So we are a very, very secure platform. Unlike, I guess, we consider maybe Crowdcube or Funding Circle, when those investors put onto their platform, those are great platforms, by the way, we love them. But just saying, for an investor's side point of view, there is more of a risk investing on their platform than there is on our platform, because you are actually purchasing an invoice. Finally, transparency. One of the main downsides with traditional invoice factoring, traditional invoice financing is there are a number of disbursements, a number of hidden fees that if you want to leave the account, if you want to cancel after 6 months, you will have to pay extra. With Market Invoice, there are 2 fees. There is our investor fee, which incentivizes our investors to buy your invoices, and the Market Invoice fee, which can be 1% of the face value of the invoice. That's all. So how do we know whether we are truly disrupting invoice finance? How do we know that we are creating a real rival within this space? So here's just some interesting statistics, which we believe kind of goes some way to, rather than just our figures, our data on how many invoices we've lended towards, here's some interesting figures that we think show that trend. So roughly 25% is the average growth, annual revenue growth of our customers. Our customers that use us are not companies in trouble. These are not companies with cash flow problems desperately trying to rescue their company. These are fast-growing companies who are looking to accelerate their growth. 30% of the invoices on our platform are for export. Invoice financers will not normally touch export, especially to exotic regions, which are considered to be potentially higher risk. Because we have a network of investors, we can spread that risk amongst that portfolio and take on export. We can take on construction. We can take on highly concentrated sales ledgers, which typical financiers really struggle with or will simply not do whatsoever. Finally, 80% of our clients have never used invoice finance before. These are not people who have previously used invoice finance who have found that we are a better solution. These are companies who are realizing that this is an alternative for a B2B fast-growing company. Why take on debt when you can finance an invoice you've already received? Just finally as well, I guess something we find quite interesting is rivals or allies. There are strengths to both of our propositions, and we believe that we do not necessarily need to be mutually exclusive, whether we're rivals or allies. There are a number of high-profile partnerships between some of the leading peer-to-peer lenders and the banks. We ourselves are talking with many of the big banks about potentially using our technology to enhance their product, us using their brand name to further get us into the mainstream. There are many ways we can work together. We believe that rivals presents a perhaps unfair picture of us working against each other. There is real potential for the companies to work, for fintech companies and banks to work together. So finally, thank you very much for listening. I will also take questions. If you want to wait to the panel, then by all means. But yeah, I can take a couple of questions. Do I have time?
Yeah, feel free, so give me a second.
Okay. Great. No, yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's a great concept, and I know people probably use it quite a lot. But what's
Yeah.
the average discount on an invoice?
The average discount on an invoice. So as I was saying, we have two fees, right? So we have, firstly is our market invoice fee. Let's take, for example, a £100,000 invoice for a company with a turnover of, say, £7.5 million. So the market invoice fee would be 1% of the face value of that invoice. So if we were going to give you 85% of the value of that invoice up front, the money you would receive today, you would receive £84,000 of that. Market invoice would receive £1,000. Our investors would receive similarly another 1%, which would accumulate over the month. So say the invoice was paid within a month's time, on that 30 days when the invoice is finally paid, the remaining £15,000 would go back to you, minus again that 1%, that £1,000, which goes to our investors. So in the end, the company would end up with a £98,000 of the value of that invoice after the 30 days and the invoice has finally been paid, except they received £84,000 of it within 24 hours. Yes.
How do you authenticate an invoice?
How do we authenticate an invoice? Good question. So that's all part of the process. The verification process is very important for us, obviously, to make sure fraudulent transactions, they do happen. People do love to try a fraudulent transaction, see if they can get a free £80,000, see if they can just try it out. Well, our in-house risk model is very sophisticated. We've had 0 fraudulent transactions, and long may that continue. There is, ultimately, we always verify with the end debtor. So we will send an anonymous confidential email, which is often forwarded by, make sure that the seller and the debtor maintain that relationship. We don't intrude, we're not like factoring. We won't take credit control. You maintain your relationship with your client. All we do is send an anonymous verification cloud email saying, can you please confirm this invoice is legitimate? They say yes, process continues. A couple more, yes at the back please.
Are the fees just linked to, are they fixed fees, or are they sort of linked to the nature of the credit?
Yeah, another good question. The fees are, I was hoping to go into the fees a bit later. Maybe we want to have a chat a bit later on, but the fees are dynamic. The fees, not only are they depend on the nature of the credit, as you mentioned. For example, if you have a larger debtor or a smaller debtor, we will change the advance rate. So you may only get 60% if your debtor is particularly small. Similarly, but the more you use the platform as well, those fees will decrease. So I guess you would say that if you use the platform once, that fee initially I said 0.99%. If you use the platform on the 10th time, that fee could drop all the way down to 0.19%. At the same time, if you're a small company, say 500k turnover or less, the first fee when you use the platform will be closer to 2.5, maybe 2.9%. Again, the more you use the platform, that will fall to 2%, 1.5%, and so on. Because the more you use the platform, the more we'll reward you with lower fees. Yes, in the back.
The gentleman's question earlier about sort of leads into this, but you mentioned you're a technology-led company.
Yeah.
This is quite a unique business compared to, say, Mondo, where it can be very automated.
Uh-huh.
How much of your back office systems or each deal is actually run by an algorithm or a risk model, and how much of it is still very manual? Specifically
with regards to the risk model, the risk team is undoubtedly the most important part of our company. There's the largest part of the company, and they do have a very complicated algorithm within it, but everything is overseen by a human eyes, right? We do not allow it to just potentially run away with us and not have someone monitoring and making sure that anything that goes through the platform is legitimate. It's the reason we have had such a low default rate and such a low ultimate crystallized loss rate. That sounds like a question that would be more relevant for our risk team than myself. All I know is I know the figures, and we've never had a dodgy deal, and our crystallized loss rate is incredibly low. Yeah, thank you.
Does the overall pricing end up being more than competitive than if you're possible, and I assume you're set back?
So the challenge when we're talking about competitors is, say, a bank, they won't do single invoice financing. They will say, great, yes, you want to finance your entire ledger, put your entire ledger through us. Make sure that you put the X amount through the ledger every month, or this is the fee you will pay. And it's very restrictive. Potentially, if you're willing and more than happy to put your entire ledger through the platform, there is a possibility they could be cheaper than us, but you have no flexibility. As I said as well, with a dynamic pricing model, the first time you use us, whilst it may be 0.99%, the more you use us, the more it goes down to 0.19% after, say, 5 or 6, 7, 8 trades, and then all of a sudden you yourself on a very competitive pricing model with still the remaining flexibility. But as with all of these things, the bank or the lender will decide based on the company. If you're a trustworthy company, you have a trustworthy debtor, they'll probably give you a good rate, but they will not give you the flexibility or the speed that we will be able to give you. Is that all? All right, perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.